Hey guys, Happy New Year. Welcome to the OT Minute. It's that time of the year to partake in the timeless tradition of setting up New Year's resolutions that may or may not fall off by the end of January. Now, I'm recording this at the end of January, so if you've made it this far, congratulations to you. Any resolution, whether it's exercise, to read more, to study more, sleep more, parent better, eat healthier, be more knowledgeable about a subject matter, or whatever it may be, all of these depend on establishing habits and routines that support our goals. Now, as OTs, we know that as part of our practice framework, at least as it's outlined in the OTPF here in the US, our performance patterns, which consists of habits, routines, roles, and rituals, are essential components of human existence that help to make our lives easier, it helps to make our occupational performance more effective, and they contribute to meaning in our day-to-day lives. We know conversely, these performance patterns can also hinder our desired occupational performance if they're ineffective or don't align with our deeply held beliefs, values, and desires. Now, in my own personal journey of professional development and personal development this year, I've been working my way through James Clear's book called Atomic Habits. And I have to say, it's an excellent book. It's an easy, powerful read, and I think it's especially great for OTs and OT students because it overlaps with some of our occupational therapy foundational concepts, and it gives us some very practical tools to help sharpen our understanding of habits and how to establish habits and routines that support meaningful occupation. So today I'd like to highlight two of these foundational OT concepts that I think correlate at least in part with Atomic Habits. Understanding those better can help us in our professional development as OTs when we are trying to establish more effective habits and routines for ourselves, and it can also help us in our practice as OTs as we are helping clients reestablish habits that maybe they've lost, or we're trying to establish new habits that support their occupational goals. Now, before we dive in, I think it's important to clarify what we mean by habits, because how the OTPF defines it versus how we use that word in our day-to-day lives is a little bit different. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines habits as a usual way of behaving, something that a person does often in a regular and repeated way. That is a pretty broad definition, and I like it for its simplicity and the fact that I think most people would define habits in a very similar way. However, as OTs, we may want to hone in a little bit on a specific definition that helps us in our understanding to separate what's habits versus what's routines, and how do they relate and how are they different. The OTPF defines habits using a definition by Matuska and Barrett, stating that habits are specific automatic behaviors performed repeatedly, relatively automatically, and with little variation. So habits are the things we do almost mindlessly, like placing our keys in a certain spot repeatedly, or biting our nails, or turning on the TV when we get home from work. In contrast, the OTPF defines routines as patterns of behaviors that are observable, regular, and repetitive, and that provide structure to daily life. So it tends to be a series of activities done in a particular order and possibly during a specific part of our day, such as our morning routine, which may consist of first making coffee, then showering, and then eating our breakfast. Now, in James Clear's Atomic Habits, he uses the term habits in a Merriam-Webster's kind of way, meaning when he speaks about habits, he's emphasizing regular and repeated behaviors. The goal of this book is to help readers create small habits or changes to their habits that over time lead to significantly improved outcomes. Thus the use of the word atomic in the book title, meaning small or minuscule. Okay, now that we have a clear definition of what habits are and we have an idea of what James Clear's book is all about, let's dive into a bit of the actual content of James Clear's book, and later in the video we'll hopefully tie it in together with some of the OT concepts that is helpful to reflect on. So Clear starts off chapter 2 discussing why creating good or more effective habits is so hard, and what an important question to address, because the reality, if you've tried setting up habits, which I assume we all have, it can feel like we're swimming upstream. He proposes that changing habits is so hard because first, we are trying to change the wrong thing. So we need to identify what's the right thing that we should be trying to change to have effective habit change. And then secondly, we are trying to change our habits in the wrong way. Now, in this video, we'll really explore that first mistake a little bit more. Now, as far as that first mistake goes, according to James Clear, he proposes a simple model with 3 levels of change that happens when we think about establishing habits. The surface level is that our outcomes or results change. The second is that our systems change. And then the third level and the deepest level of habit change is that our identity changes with new habits. He sums it up nicely, stating that outcomes are about what you get, process is about what you do, and then identity is about what you believe. Now, many of us, including myself, tend to set goals like New Year's resolutions focused on outcomes or results. Then we think about changing the systems or what we do in our day-to-day lives, and then finally, we may see our identity change, but it's not generally the main focus. For example, I may want to bench press 300 pounds at the gym by the end of the year. In creating my goal, I started with the result or the outcome in mind. Now, I know I will have to change a process or some system in my life to help me achieve those results. For example, I may go to the gym every day for an hour to work out, and then once I reach my goal of being able to lift 300 pounds, then I will be a weightlifter, which is the change in identity. That is the deepest level of change. However, in that flow, it tends to kind of be, I feel like, almost the afterthought. Now, James Clear calls this outcomes-based habit, starting with changing outcomes, then moving to process, and then finally identity change. However, he proposes that if we really want to change our habits effectively, we need to shift to what he calls identity-based habits. He reverses the approach, starting with a focus on changing our beliefs about ourselves. This in turn affects our systems and processes that we set up in our lives, which ultimately gives us the results or outcomes that we desire. So instead of focusing on what we want to achieve, James Clear focuses on who do we want to become. For example, instead of saying, I want to eat healthier, the real and deepest level of change that we are looking for and that we want to attain is being a healthy person. Or instead of saying, I want to run more, we can say, I want to be a runner. Those goals are identity-based goals that focus on identity instead of outcomes. Now, he comes to this conclusion referring to a 2011 study that suggests that once a person begins to believe something about themselves, their actions are more likely to begin conforming and aligning to that new belief. He also points out that there's a type of dark side to this as well. If a person believes a negative identity about themselves, their action will also conform to this identity. For example, if a person believes that they are not smart, then they are less likely to engage in the type of behaviors that might support intellectual gain. Therefore, Clear argues that the process of changing habits is really a process about changing our beliefs about ourselves. And that is the deepest level of habit change. Now, the whole point about identity-based habits immediately brought to mind for me the classic OT concept of occupational identity, specifically from the MOHO model. This concept means that what we do over time makes up our occupational identities. Occupational identity is a complex mix of who we are as evidenced by the actions that we take in our day-to-day lives and who we want to be. So as OTs, not only do we stop to think about what our clients need to do, but we help them consider why they need to do it or want to even do it for the fulfillment of what identity, what role. Essentially, we're exploring who they want to be or become. And this is also reminiscent of Anne Wilcox and her doing, being, and becoming. Now, tapping into the meaningfulness of the person beyond the mere action taken is a powerful agent for goal attainment, and again is one of the things that I absolutely love about occupational therapy as an approach to helping people. Okay, this sounds great, but say we want to put this into practice for ourselves or for our clients. Maybe we want to make occupational identity the starting point for our habit change. Now, how do we do that? Well, James Clear proposes a simple 2-step process, but before we jump into that process, if you've found some value in this video so far, please go ahead and click that like button to let me know. Also, would love to hear from you in the comment section down below. What is an occupational identity that this year that you are leaning into? Also, is there a habit that you're hoping to establish to move you towards that meaningful identity? Okay, with that being said, let's go back to the 2-step process that Atomic Habits lays out for changing our identity. First, he suggests that we need to decide the type of person that we want to be. So it's a bit of a mental shift, and it's about clarifying our goals. And I think this is a great affirmation of the OT process. We know how important it is to start with a robust occupational profile for a client. And that allows us to explore what's important to the client, including what roles are important to the client, what their deeply held values are, and what their deeply held beliefs are, or their convictions, including how do they perceive themselves. It gives them a chance to reflect on more than just what are the deficits or challenges that they're facing. Plus, it also allows us a deeper understanding of who our clients are as occupational human beings and their previous, current, and desired occupational identities. The occupational profile naturally gives us the opportunity to ask those questions about identity as part of the evaluation process. Now, once a person has a clear idea of who they want to become, then the second step towards identity-based habits, according to James Clear, is proving that desired identity to oneself with small wins. Now, James Clear has a helpful analogy. He explains that every time we take an action towards doing something that aligns with our desired identity, we're metaphorically casting a vote for that identity. The more we vote for this certain identity via our actions, the more the identity is realized. I think this is a helpful visualization of the process that's happening when we take small steps of action towards establishing new habits and routines. I think this description provides, in some ways, a simple and tangible analogy for occupational therapy's concept of occupational competence, which is also a concept from MoHo. Occupational competence is the measure of how consistent we are in doing the things that make up our occupational identities. For example, I may have the desired occupational identity of being an engaged father for my kids, but the degree to which I follow through on the tasks or activities that make up that important identity, that's how competent I am regarding that identity. For example, for every time I put my phone away and read to my kids, I am casting a vote for my desired identity to be a present and engaged father. Therefore, I would be increasing my occupational competency with each action I take towards that goal. I think what a great tangible analogy and a motivating way to think about the importance of small habits as it relates to increasing our occupational competence. And I think that analogy is a really helpful kind of teaching tool or a way to describe the process that we are taking a client on, to encourage them to have those small wins as they're trying to establish habits. I hope you found some video in my musings about habits, occupational identity, occupational competence, as well as the value of the occupational profile and the OT process, and some, I'm sure, random thoughts along the way. I think James Clear's book really affirms the OT process as effective and useful. And again, I would highly recommend the book for personal development. This is just a small taste of what the book has to offer. In fact, everything pretty much that we talked about is just from chapter 2. He goes on to lay out a framework that's really helpful and that has some really practical tips for creating and changing habits. I'll put a link to the book down below if you want to check it out some more. I'm also dabbling with the idea of creating additional videos exploring some of the strategies and how they may be helpful for OTs. So let me know if you're interested in more of that type of content. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, or share it if you think someone might benefit from it. Until next time, my friends, stay occupational. I'll see you in the next video.